La pausa. Tengo que pediros a los que estáis en los pasillos, por favor, que os sentéis disciplinadamente y que los que estáis entrando acabéis de hacerlo para comenzar la sesión la tercera sesión, donde ya recurrimos a figuras más familiares. Hemos tenido los escritores, hemos tenido los alcaldes, ahora llevamos con el mundo más próximo de la arquitectura. De hecho, Dominique PERRAULT, que nos acompaña hoy, ha estado ya aquí en Pamplona en un congreso anterior. IWAN no, esta es la primera vez que lo tenemos aquí y es estupendo tenerlos juntos. No voy a contarles quiénes son, porque además hemos hecho un folleto donde está en su biografía, así que ahorro el esfuerzo de presentarlos y simplemente les digo que la sesión va a ser como las anteriores, van a hablar durante un máximo de 40 minutos cada uno y luego van a dialogar entre ellos y con aquellos de ustedes que deseen hacerlo. Así que sin más, Iwan, whenever you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for the invitation to speak here tonight. I saw the line of this event was less architecture, more cities. That was exactly what I was trying to show also tonight. A lot of you probably know my work from the architecture publications. I'm hired by many of the well-known architects to document their finished works, but also like follow sometimes construction projects. Like actually I started with architecture about 13 years ago. I came from a background for more documentary photography. I met kind of by accident Rem Koolhaas just at the time that he started working on the construction of CCTV, this massive building in Beijing. I was really fascinated with that, how such a project comes together.
Sorry, I must ask the people up there. Debo pedir a la gente que apague un poquito las luces, que las haga más bajas para que se puedan ver las imágenes mejor en la pantalla. O sea, así que si son tan amables y me escuchan ahora, en el control de luces, por favor, bájenla todo lo que puedan. Si se pueden luego iluminar cuando tengamos aquí el diálogo, pero ahora incluso el escenario me gustaría que estuviera casi a oscuras. Gracias.
Yes,
Sorry.
great, perfect. It was an interesting moment at the time that he just started the construction of CCTV, this massive building in Beijing, which really sort of looms over the city. I was totally fascinated by the scale of that project, the time at that moment in China with like everything in the run-up to the Olympics. It was 2005, so still 3 years to come to the Olympics. And these very large-scale government projects, how they influence the city. So it's not only the architecture and the building, but also very much sort of how the city around it was changing, what these construction workers were doing. Like for a project like this, there were at times 10,000 construction workers on site who were all migrant workers who came from the countryside and settled down like in little villages around it. But at the same time also the evictions of people who lived in the surroundings where houses were torn down and new buildings came up. So for me that was sort of my crash course into architecture. I followed that project for many years. As well as the Olympic Stadium by Herzog and de Meuron, which you see here in a few pictures during construction. And it's also like a lot of these moments which fascinate me, how, we know these large-scale projects from the sort of glorious final images, but especially sort of during construction, how these buildings are made by people who have a sort of whole personal life around these construction sites. Like here at night, they're just having their sort of almost family time next to such a construction site where they're watching TV and having their regular day-to-day activities. I wanted to show a couple of projects more around cities. Of course, a lot of the finished projects, my commissioned work by architects here, for instance, Zaha Hadid, those are large-scale cultural projects, projects which deal also a lot with the city. I like to show that that context and like how it's used, where it is, that it's not just like this sort of perfect fancy line of the architect, but also the grittiness of the city around it, like this one. It is in Azerbaijan where she designed this large theater, museum, cultural center in a city, an old former Soviet city. This was a project we just published last year with Harvard on John Portman, the architect who just passed away in end of last year. Until that time, he was still very active. We were working on the book about a year and a half ago when we started on it. I came a number of times to Atlanta, a city which he really defined in a way. Downtown Atlanta was a place where he started in the 70s to build these massive office blocks, hotels, conference centers, and so on. I was lucky to still meet him there in his office, where he still, like he was at the time, 92, came daily into the office, where he's standing here between his models, in the foreground, his buildings in the background, and really immersed by his designs everywhere. And Atlanta is a fascinating place with, like, it's all sort of this infrastructure almost of buildings where, tunnels, underground, tubes overground, which connect all the buildings, a climate which is in the summer extremely hot and humid. So he had this whole idea of a whole city which could be lived in inside, basically. A kind of futuristic idea. It's kind of a future, how the future looked 30, 40 years ago. And it's, for me, always interesting to look at these places again, sort of with a new eye, how they're used these days, how people inhabit these places, how they're changed over time, and how people adapt to that kind of life. A very vertical city. You sort of walk in between these buildings, sometimes outside, sometimes inside, and it has this whole confined feel throughout the city. And then there's this, all these sort of futuristic pods jettisoning up and down, elevators, the tubes where you go through, this whole interconnectedness, which was a big part of his work at the time. For the book with Harvard, we documented many of his projects there throughout the city, how he really defined that city, how he changed that city, but also visited a number of his other projects around the country. What is also interesting is, like, for instance, a lot of the public artworks there in the city were also designed by him. He was, besides an architect, also an artist. So when you walk through the city, you come across many of his public works, and then you find these kind of moments where almost the people become part of that, the architecture, the art, and everything together. He was very well known for the large atriums, for instance here the Hyatt hotels with these big elevators going up, and then the rotating restaurants on the top, so very futuristic feel what you still have in that in these cities. This is the Marriott Hotel, for instance, also one of these massive atrium buildings. Here we are in San Francisco, the Embarcadero Center. Los Angeles, where it's like this, also this large hotel complex really sort of comes up out of the endless asphalt of the city. And again, this kind of futuristic feel, elevators which come up and down on the outside of the buildings. And then I was also fortunate enough to visit a couple of his houses. He built 2 houses for himself. This was the first one, which he built in the end of the 60s, and really a sort of first way to implement his ideas. All the columns, he had this idea of these exploded columns where actually a lot of things happen inside. So the elevators, for instance, ran through these columns in his larger buildings. But then in his home, where everything is, of course, in a much smaller scale, you see there's still, the circulation happens inside, like the staircases, which run inside these columns up, or the library, which is inside one of the other columns. And it's this whole idea which he brought there for the first time. And his other house, his weekend house on the Gulf, outside Atlanta, there on the sea, this massive white concrete building on the sea there, which was really interesting to visit there. And also there it's a whole exhibition center at the same time, where he shows not only his architectural ideas but also his art, which is everywhere intertwined with the architecture. I think, and then sort of you step in, another, this kind of future from a while ago, the 80s home where everything was connected and high-tech, and still the same housekeeper who is there every day and knows exactly how to program each light with a kind of 80s way of doing it. You have to plug in a box and type in a code, but he was the one who still ran the whole house well. And then the sort of small exhibition spaces throughout the houses. Here we're in Doha, Qatar. OMA just finished there these 2 buildings. The headquarters of the Qatar Foundation, this massive cube which is sitting there in the desert, and the library, this diamond-shaped, very flat, big open library space, which was really interesting to see there in the education city, this whole new part of Qatar, Doha, Qatar, which is being built there. And this aerial perspective is always important in my work. I like not to only focus on these details of the building and how they're built, but also really step back from the architecture, show the context where they're actually built. And for me, it's also a sort of way to stay kind of awake. I'm always traveling, and like you sometimes wake up, where the heck am I this day? And actually stepping back away from the architecture and really showing that context, where it is, the relationship with the rest of the city around it, how the city around it grows around these kind of architectural icons, is really interesting for me. Like here, Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest tower still in the world. And you sometimes see also the strangeness of these places, like this wide open desert place where there's this one row where all the towers come up, and then of course one of them has to be the tallest in the world, but actually there's so much space around it. Why all these towers, you have to question sometimes. Or here we're in Paris with the Fondation Louis Vuitton from Frank Gehry. Sao Paulo, one of these endless cities which goes on forever. And then you see these buildings which we know as the architectural icons, the Oscar Niemeyer building, but it's in this, when you step away, it almost disappears in this sea of high-rises around it. And then like very old cities like Kyoto here, with the large imperial gardens, these massive super blocks in the city. And when you step away, you fly high above the city, you see this incredible grid of this old city and how it grew and grew and got more densely pixelated in a way, except for these big institutions like these imperial gardens and the large government complexes there. Mexico City, one of the informal neighborhoods, but still like also a place where there's a lot of organization. People build their own houses in a way, but there's a very strict grid to it. or Los Angeles here with its highways, and at night where this grid, like a city of highways, really becomes visible. Miami here, and what's really striking when you fly high above the city, how incredibly flat it is and just literally floats on top of the water. And you see also like what kind of challenges this city will get in the coming years with its rising sea levels there. Chicago, with its high rises and the center of the city, but also the incredible flatlands around it. And like Chicago, we know so much of all the high rises, but actually the average building height there in the city is just 2 stories, which you really see when you take the distance from the city and see the incredible flatness of the rest of the city around it. Or here in Tokyo, which is still so much defined by its old waterways throughout the city, which over time became highways, became all the interconnections in the city, and how a city grew around that. New York, with the Four Freedoms Park. And there was this picture which I took 5 years ago, just the day after the big superstorm Sandy hit, where half the city was without electricity. And that's also one of these moments when you really step away and you keep that distance, where you can understand what kind of impact building cities and these extraordinary moments have on a city. This is Nairobi, Kibera, one of the largest slums in Northern Africa, about 1 million people who live there, and here flying over it, you see this incredible pattern of that neighborhood, where with very narrow streets and a sort of continuous roof of corrugated steel. I was there, I proposed a small project to do there with Gascano, the Spanish architects. They did the year before this beautiful small vaccination center, really in the countryside of Kenya, really far away, like you had to go with a 4x4, 5 hours drive outside the nearest little airstrip there. So it's all built with very basic materials, corrugated steel, some scaffolding pipes. That was the only things they brought in, and for the rest just materials from the site. When I was there in Kibera, this slum, I was working with a small school which had a big fire a couple of years before and was struggling to find a place again for the school. And at the same time, Gascano was asked by the Louisiana Museum, which you see here, the gardens of the Louisiana Museum, to make a small pavilion for a large Africa show the museum was doing. So we proposed to actually build the new school, which was very much needed there in Kibera in Kenya. Built it first there for the exhibition at the Louisiana Museum, and after the exhibition ended 3 months later, they dismantled the whole structure, put it in a container, and brought it back to Kibera. Here you see the city again from above, and how the school is built exactly in the spot where the original school was standing. So they took the measurements of the original school, 8 tiny classrooms in this incredible informal city, and built it with, again, very basic materials, scaffolding pipes, corrugated steel, corrugated plastics, and it was all paid for by the exhibition in Denmark at the Louisiana Museum. And after the exhibition, it had a real life there as a school in Kibera, where it serves now. I go quickly through these. And what was also a big part of it, like Kibera, until recently, it didn't have any toilets, public toilets or private toilets, and it was also a place known for the invention of the flying toilet, which was basically people were doing their thing in a little bag and then throw it as far away as possible, so that all the roofs were basically littered with feces and so. So a big thing for the city over the last years was to start building public toilets in this incredible neighborhood, and a big part of the school was also to teach children how to use actually a toilet and how to use water and hygiene. So what Selgas and Duccia did there was also bringing the water through the scaffolding pipes and bringing the toilet really as a sort of centerpiece there in the building. And a very open building, like where sort of the neighborhood can peek in, can see what happens there. There's a small playground, like in a neighborhood where there's absolutely zero public space. Every inch basically is used. So a big part of of the site, of the still very tiny site, was to keep an open place there where kids could play and have performances and do their things. Let me go quickly through these. Here you see still a few more aerial views of how it really fits in this incredible neighborhood there. And since the roof was made of this translucent corrugated plastic, like at night it became really the sort of icon and beacon there in that neighborhood. This is another project I worked on over the last couple of years with Manuel Hertz and the ETH in Zurich. He had a big interest in how modernism evolved there on the African continent over the last decades. And especially on these countries which all were in a moment of like independence in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and as part of their independence hired mainly foreign architects, often from their former colonizers, to build their large government buildings, universities, public housing, and all these kind of things, and really sort of make a statement like, this is our new capital, this is our new city, and so. And it was of course the time that like cities like Brasilia and Chandigarh were also built. So very much with that in mind, there were a number of examples over the African continent where similar things were happening, which have been rarely documented before. I was really fascinated also by that subject, and again, sort of how these structures are now used almost half a century later. And especially on a continent there, like Africa, of course there's very little documentation about these projects. Architecture is really a sort of byproduct. The needs for anything else are often much higher. And it really becomes sort of this background in the city, which is really interesting to see. Here we're in Ivory Coast. This is Yamoussoukro. Was a completely new built capital in the center of the country. Big, wide open streets, big ideas at that time to build the new capital, like Brasilia, in the middle of the country. The presidential palace, which sits in the middle of the city with a big canal around it with its natural defense, as you can see in the corner, to protect the president, but also beautiful small university buildings, schools, and all these government buildings throughout the city, often not in their best state anymore, but very well used and really, important pieces of architecture in a context like that. And what was interesting also, the Catholic Church built an exact copy of the Vatican there. And here you see it, in front of the large slum, which sits there in front, and then this massive building of the Vatican in the back. And they thought the Vatican was not big enough, so they enlarged the whole building 1.5 times. So it's actually really out of scale, which you can see here. And when you go inside, inside these columns are actually the elevators going up to the 2nd floor, and so on. So a strange place. A strange building to find there in the on the African continent. Here we're in Dakar, Senegal, also one of these places where a lot of this modernist architecture was happening, from public buildings, housing like these, to large exhibition centers. And what was really interesting, like at the time, it was a place where architects could experiment also a lot with this tropical modernism. There was, of course, little technology, no air conditioning or things available at the time there. So it's a lot with working with these louvers, creating shade, creating natural ventilation. And of course, sort of the natural ventilation is starting to being used as storage spaces for anything else as well. But that's also the beauty of these things, that things can evolve over time and people really start using these places. This is a large exhibition center in the outskirts of the city. Incredible place with these big triangular buildings littered through the site, and this triangle shape sort of followed through to the smallest details. And again, like, a big public building, but at the same time, anything happens there. People live in it, people do their laundry in there, and it's really becoming part of the life there in Senegal. Here we're in Lusaka, the capital of Zambia. They called it also the Los Angeles of Africa. For me, the sort of only resemblance with LA was the sort of endless flatness and its small city center with a few high rises where the government and the National Bank and buildings like that were sitting, which were all also this part of this post-colonial, post-independence built-up. Interesting public markets where everything is sold and resold and reused, and like this incredible DVD shop where I stumbled upon, where every DVD is shown almost as a building material, filling the walls, the columns, the ceilings, and everything else. The universities, again, which are a big part of that whole rebuilding process, also with very simple materials, just a screen of louvers which lets air through, light through, but not a bright sunlight. Interesting student dormitories, very much Louis Kahn inspired, tiny dormitories where 2 or 3 students live together in a small bedroom, and then a sort of open corridor where the more public life happened, and the kitchen and gathering spaces were in the middle. The parliament building of Lusaka, with these large stuffed animals in the middle. And here we're in Kenya again, Nairobi, the city center with its incredible bus station, this sort of whirlpool of mini buses which turns around, a very lively place, with the Kenyatta Center, which you see here in the center, which was, when it was built, end 60s, early 70s, was the tallest building on the African continent. Partly businesses which are in there, and partly the government, which holds seats in that triangular-shaped big auditorium with beautiful sort of natural light coming through. And also this use of the dark, heavy concrete in contrast with the bright, hot outside, just creating large shaded spaces where people can sit, rest, and enjoy their place. The University of Nairobi, also with this beautiful invention of the screened facades, and one of the large markets, a very simple sort of umbrella structure which you see scattered around the market, where people take shelter in, which gives them shelter to the rain. A very simple structure to build, but also very graphic and a big statement for a place like that, where people really sort of surrounded by all their wares which they sell, and like these two women who are sitting there really buried in anything what they sell there on the market. This is another project I did with Manuel Hertz 2 years ago for the Venice Architecture Biennial in Algeria. We proposed to do the first Western Sahara country pavilion. The Western Sahara was this country below Morocco, which just basically the day after their independence was annexed by Morocco, and still sits in this limbo where many people fled the country in the 70s, were taken in by Algeria, and there's still these large refugee camps. They're in the middle of the Sahara, where nowadays 160,000 refugees live. And you see also this fact of, that there was a big, at that time, 1975, I believe, these people fled their country, were taken in by Algeria. UNHCR provided tents and all the temporary refugee housing, but we're now 40 years later, and these people are still there and built a kind of incredible city out of nothing in the middle of nowhere there. It's a kind of, almost a science fiction place, you see, there in the middle of the Sahara, where there's absolutely nothing. They built a whole city from scrap materials, and at the same time everything works there. They built schools. They have a sort of a functioning government in exile there, and there's 4 main cities which we photographed, and we photographed this sort of daily life and the aspirations of people there. So you see the shops, all the sort of things you see in a regular city, which people built there with their own hands. There, and even like the Zara found its way there, and countless little shops where you step into, which are incredibly designed with whatever kind of materials people could find there. Even the Carrefour made it out there. I'm not sure if they know exactly that it was there, but at least, people find under the most incredible circumstances, ways to live, and these sort of temporary solutions over time become permanent, and people now, a whole generation, of course, grew up there with no end in sight to ever come back. Even like the photo studios where you take your family portraits at the important moments throughout your life. The sort of local IKEA where you buy all the inventory for your houses. The hairdressers, the graveyard even. A graveyard, you couldn't make the gravestone, so whatever kind of stone or material you could find to mark a grave is used there, but even with such a simple gesture, you know sort of where you are. And then, houses and buildings and people, everything is almost made from, recycled and reused materials in incredibly fragile ways, of course. And like even sort of the walls are reused cars, anything what could be found, but then also like all kind of architectural aspirations, what people see in pictures, what people remember they are using, like they're building columns, they're decorating their houses. Some houses are incredibly refined with nice porches and all kind of details. And this was one of the interesting ones also, like this nice entrance door with the porch, but then when you look closely and see how the arch is made, it's actually, they used an old car tire to, as a kind of formwork to build their front door. But what is interesting is that it's not only the people, but there's still like a functioning government there also, which works in exile. This is their defense department, this building. It's not very well camouflaged in a way, but like very prominent building there in the city center, the Department of Housing, and here's the Parliament of the Sahrawi people. Which comes there together once in a while in this building. So all these things are still present even in these very informal conditions. So we presented this pavilion, we made a large tent there, which sat there in the center of the Giardini, where we presented the stories of the people, the photographs, a number of photographs on the walls and video loops. And we asked the women of these Sahrawi foundations to make 3 large carpets showing a number of their prime important buildings, which they made into these carpets, and showing the history of how these people, where they traveled and how they came together, and a map of the place there. This was the women, the leader of the Sahrawi women group who made the carpets. I quickly want to show you this project. Here we are in Caracas, Venezuela. Also again a place which had an incredible potential. This was supposed to be the tallest building in Caracas when it was built in the 70s, early 80s, just before the collapse of the economy there. It was supposed to be the largest, the headquarters of the largest bank of Venezuela. The economy crashed, the bank went bankrupt, the developer died, and the building stood empty for many years. It's just a concrete carcass of the building, a construction site where over the last decade about 3,000 people moved into that construction site and built a whole vertical city themselves inside that construction site. So it was a place, there were no elevators, no handrails, nothing real building has, but in a place like Caracas, where 70% of the population lives in these slums, in the informal favelas, they needed to find places wherever they could build a place for themselves. And these favelas are violent places. This building they could control in a way, like it was, there's one entrance to the building where everyone, all these 3,000 people who live in there, come in and out from. They know exactly who's there. And this was a much safer alternative for many of these people. And also there you see all these decisions of how people create a place for themselves. Here, this is the lobby, the main entrance. People paint it nicely. They plant a tree in this concrete place and they make it into a public place where kids play basketball and everything, but at the same time, you see everywhere the remnants of a real construction site. There's staircases up to the 40th floor without handrails, huge open gaps in the building, etc., etc. Connected to the building, you see there's a parking garage, 15 stories tall, and since there was no elevators in the building, they decided to set up a taxi service basically in the parking garage with taxis driving the whole day just up and down, basically to bring people and goods up and down in the building. And so the parking garage is at certain levels connected to the rest of the building. Every floor has its own little shops, people who just made a hole in the wall. They live there, but at the same time sell all the basic needs to survive there in a place. And then once you step into these apartments, it's incredible to see how people build their their personal spaces, like from incredibly detailed to very basic moments, like here people who just move in, who absolutely have nothing, but once they move in, yeah, they have already a roof over their head, so they just define a space with some curtains, some sheets hanging around them, and slowly over time, whenever they have some money, they start buying some building materials, and slowly you see these walls rise and rise and becoming more and more of a defined space. And people often, yeah, when you live on the 28th floor, you have no elevator. It's not easy to get down, so their whole life starts to happen on that floor. There's like little shops, like little factories. Everything is happening in there. The hairdressers, the shops, and even like here on the 28th floor, where there's the gym, the guy who found unused parts of the elevators which were never installed and uses them as the weight in the building. This is an example of a place in the Philippines, Manila, the north of the Philippines, north of Manila, where there's this large cemetery with all these small mausoleums, and also there again a place with an incredible shortage for people to live. People started to invade all these small mausoleums, and now that cemetery is not only a cemetery, but it's also a city where 10,000 people live in between these graves, and everything happens there on top and inside and around these graves. So it's little shops in there, people sleep in there, people make their homes, people go to school there, and it's for them the most normal thing basically to live there. For us, a kind of extraordinary place. And then once a year, during the Day of the Dead, all these people move out, and it's still a place to think about the people before. And it's incredible how that sort of context can disappear for people who are there every day, and where that became a sort of normal livelihood for. I would like to end with this project. Here we're in Africa again, Ethiopia, Lalibela. It's a place which was created about 1,000 years ago. It's a whole landscape which is incredibly carved out. There's about 11 churches which were carved out there in the rocks, but not like in Petra or places like that where it's into a wall, into the side of a mountain. But here there's an incredible three-dimensional space carved out in the rock down below. I was there a few years ago during Ethiopian Christmas. They have the Coptic calendar, so their Christmas is always a little bit a different moment, end of the year, end of December, early January. So I was there during Ethiopian Christmas, where thousands and thousands of pilgrims still come to that site, and even a place like that, which is 1,000 years old, becomes completely alive again. It's a kind of architecture where it's not by building something up to make a space, but it's all removing materials and creating a kind of negative space to create a final place to be used. So this whole landscape is kind of carved out with trenches going down into the earth, small tunnels underground, and then people crawling in and crawling out from these places, because the entrance to these actual churches is then down below in that pit where the church is. Of course, over the years you see like how people altered it and how it's sort of carved out and worn out, but the incredible beauty of the sometimes very detailed moments, architectural moments, how things are designed and really thought out, like you cannot make a mistake. It's all carved material or all a sort of final part, and then sort of the roughness of the rock and the place around it. And of course the light inside is very special. Some moments during the day where the sun really shines all the way down there, but most of the time of the day it's just kind of the reflected red light from the red rocks which comes inside these spaces. And then, all kind of details which you see even carved out into these windows, into these places again. And then also all kind of architectural details, really, like the columns, these rows of columns, like, it's probably not structurally necessary, but they knew it, they implemented that, and they went to incredible great lengths to carve out these spaces. And then once you really get inside these churches, there's another whole level of a kind of negative space, which is all made from removed materials to create an actual space and an experience there. And then this is one of the most impressive ones, where you are underground, coming out of one of these spaces, and then there's another very deep space going down all the way into sort of nothingness, which people create just to create that kind of experience. Thank you.
Well, thank you, IWAN, for this. It's a tour alrededor del mundo, this tour around the world through 800 images that ended up very appropriately for Dominique, because it ended with subterranean architecture, which is your theme today. Thank you. So, Dominique.
Thank you for the invitation. And thank you for your title about the Congress. Less architecture, I am agree. More city, we will see. It's not exactly the balance, but and thank you, Ivan, for this very emotional church in Ethiopia, and it's a perfect link with my presentation. And the presentation is not exactly a presentation about different projects. It's more or less a research about with some fiction, some reference, some projects also, obviously. And the main idea is to increase the field of the architecture. It's clear for the city we could go high, very high. It's not finished. We could go horizontally, very large territory, never finished. And also we could imagine to use the underground resources. And underground resources is this title is groundscape. Groundscape is more or less the opposite of the landscape. It's not underground. And you could see this image is l'enfer de Dante, the hell of Dante. And this image is very interesting because where our feeling about the underground situation and condition are very, we are very nervous. We don't like this kind of environment. It's dark, it's humid. You die, you go down underground, more or less. And we would like to change this relationship between the ground floor and the underground condition and our life. During the 19th century and the 20th century, the underground development was uniquely about the transportation. And also we could compare, if you want, this kind of stacking underground with different transportation system, and on the right, this bubble underground like a city, autonomous city. And the autonomous situation, like an autist situation, is for me the specificity about the project. All projects are totally autist when they are going underground. You could see 2 towers in Paris, and the level of the floor, the public space is there. And the people build 1 tower with car park, another one tower with a car park. No connection. Everywhere around the world, no connection. No link between this kind of infrastructure. When the project will be completely finished, you have a wall, close this car park, and you have another wall along the wall, the former wall, closing the other car park. It's a very interesting situation, and maybe we could imagine another kind of relationship about the infrastructure and this kind of epidermis of the planet, of the city. A first example, a long time ago, in 85, more 30 years ago, is a project in Angers, in the west of France. It's a campus, and the project proposed a center for this campus with a learning center, as we say today, and is just a surface. This surface flush with the existing ground floor of the campus. And just underneath, we are digging to introduce some different facilities and programs like an amphitheater, library, and some other reading rooms and so. It's a very simple and direct and efficient action to create a new situation for the ground floor. And also we could use this kind of fiction like more or less like a joke. Is a plan voisin in Paris, and we could imagine the plan voisin underground. And this kind of relationship between the célibataire building is creating or is involved in the library. In the library, you have 4 buildings creating a space. A lot of people know the National Library in France, and the people know the 4 towers. But in fact, the 4 towers are an important part about the skyline, but a very small part about the building itself. Because the most part of the building is underground. 200,000 square meters are built underground, 15 meters below the Seine River. It is a plan of the library. Where is the tower? There, 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 and there. But this building working with a new situation in the district, because this building creating in the same movement, in the same concept, in the same statement, 2 spaces. One public space, it is the esplanade, and another space, it is the garden, a forest. And the underground strategy could manage the relationship, a new echo or dialogue between the nature and the architecture, and also, obviously, with the city. And this kind of garden finally becomes like a biological or ecological piece of nature under control of the National Museum. And underground also is possible to introduce the natural light, because without the natural light, underground is another story. And another fiction with the Arc de Triomphe. And the underground strategy creating a new status for the memorial. You have a disc in glass, like a new pavement, with an alley in concrete, in stone, with a grab in the center. And the people could see from the underneath situation the monument. This project comes from this small chateau close to, in the west of Saint-Germain-en-Laye, close in the west of Paris. And we imagine to transform this small castle, small manor, in a congress center. And we increase this building underground. And this building is not very exciting. It's not a beautiful building, but the specificity of the building is there, is existing. And we use the existing condition without analysis about the beauty and the style, but the building is there. Okay, we work with the building like a material, and we transform this building in another building with the disc in glass. Seems to be like a pool. Also, in Paris, another example, the Place des Invalides, because under this esplanade, you have a lot of facilities. You have some police station, you have some vacant parking, you have some other kind of facilities, and more working more or less. And we imagine to introduce with this kind of very light and superficial action or concept, another kind of function. Avenue Foch in Paris also. We make a collage between the university in Korea, you will see after, in the center of the avenue. And with this kind of approach, we transform totally the relationship between the above situation and underneath situation. And we are creating some function, facility uses just underground at the place, exactly at the right place of the asphalt strip of the street. And the valley in the University of IWA is the project, is a reference about this kind of fiction in Paris for Avenue Foch. And the IWA is very impressive project because, in fact, we are building a landscape. It's not exactly the same attitude if you compare with the Michael Heiser, because the Michael Heiser action is a revelation about a landscape, existing landscape. For IWA is the same proximity, if you want, about the feeling, but we don't want to develop a revelation. We would like to rebuild the existing topography in this campus. And this place is finally a building, build a landscape. It is exactly the opposite process as we know. And this place is a geographical project. But, you know, 2 years ago, from this university, 3,000 students, 4,000 students stay in this valley, and they change the president of the Korea. The protest starts from this place. And finally, this space, more or less underground, becomes a public space. He prolonges the expansion of the urban fabric and creating a new situation between the building itself, the campus, and the district around. Immediately, we could imagine some benefit about the sustainability, because we are in the soil, in the ground, and the inertia is absolutely perfect to develop a good strategy to respect and to maintain the quality of the cities. And also another aspect is the rendering about this kind of project, because you see nothing. It's difficult to show a facade for this kind of architecture, because this architecture is a network. In fact, if I would like to present clearly, I don't know if it's clear, but clearly the project of IWA, it is this model. This model is a network, because this kind of project should develop a special network to provide some new spaces. Another example in Versailles, and the Château de Versailles is a very important chateau in France, obviously, and around the world. A lot of people visiting this chateau, 7 million visitors by year. And the problem is how is possible to manage from the same entrance to develop the entrance of the visit, and also at the same point the exit. In fact, the chateau is too small, but it's impossible to say that. And but it's too small. And we imagine a special development in this courtyard. This courtyard is La Cour des Princes, and we develop, in fact, a double deck with a new main entrance, is a new gallery, and with this staircase, we are creating a new exit. And we develop a new ground sous-sol underneath this building, and we develop under this courtyard the exit for the public, and we introduce this prism in glass in the underground to conduct the artificial light, the natural light, in this part of the courtyard. It is a view during the day and during the night. And this glass instrument, in fact, is an optical instrument, creating or maybe develop a most important presence of the historical architecture. It is also we design the interior of this pavilion in echo of Versailles, but all is in metal. The floor is in metal, and the chandelier is in metal, come from industrial field, and the mesh is in metal like that, you see. And also we refurbished the tank of the king, and Alain Ducasse installed a restaurant at the first floor. This is a strategy to create some new spaces, working with the existing building above, is the statement about the urban design, urban strategy for the Île de la Cité. And the President, François Hollande, asked us to propose or to imagine, if it's possible, a strategy to refurbish the Île de la Cité in Paris but without, it's impossible to touch. It's a World Heritage place, and it's impossible to touch the existing architecture. And in fact, we developed 3 layers. The first one is just underground, you will see it just after, to connect all building between the cathedral, the police department, headquarters, the Palace of Justice, the Sainte-Chapelle, the conciergerie, and the hospital, also the Hôtel Dieu. And finally, we have a layer absolutely efficient to create a new network between these different monuments. And the idea is, for example, for the Place Notre-Dame, is to use the historical foundation of the Hôtel Dieu, because the Hôtel Dieu was along the Seine River. And at the end of the 19th century, you could see the new Hôtel Dieu building under construction, and the place in front of the Cathedral Notre-Dame. And we imagine to open this part, the basement of the historical Hôtel Dieu location. We would like to open this on the Seine River, the place. It is the existing condition, and just behind you have this kind of architecture. And we could imagine a double deck entrance with an architectural museum and presentation existing, and we could develop in contact with the Seine River and the boat, public transportation, and the other floor with a glass floor, creating a special reflection between the cathedral and the floor. And you could see, for example, with some collage from different architects we are using, and we provide a totally new relationship between the place of the cathedral, the hospital, and the space underground. Obviously, we connect this kind of part with the public transportation. And along the Seine River, we imagine also to reinvest, to change, to refurbish the uses in this part of the Seine River. And in this kind of project, it's not very difficult. Just we should think about connection, link, and how it's possible to manage together different situations. At the end, we provide a new urban design and new kind of architecture, more sustainable and also more efficient for institutions. And we could create 100,000 new square meter is something in this kind of part of Paris. And for UNESCO is more or less a reference about the transformation concerning historical World Heritage place. At the end, another project in Korea, in Seoul, and this project is at this moment at the schematic design stage, where we won the competition at the end of the year, 17, and we developed this project with the city of Seoul and with the state of Seoul, because the client is public. And this project is a light walk. It is a project. And the project, in fact, is a new hub with the train, with 2 metro stations there, and with different facilities we will see, and also with some connection between this tower under construction, 600 meter high, and the existing building around. And the idea is to introduce a light into this big volume in concrete. This line is a light walk, and the light walk, in fact, is the entrance, but also is the relationship between the underground situation and the situation of the public space and the above. And we would like to create a place with a garden, just connecting between the district, between two sides of the district along this huge avenue. And this kind of place is important for the people, for citizens. Different uses during the winter, during the summer. And in fact, it is the project. The project is a big box in concrete, 80 meters wide, 50 meters high, and 800 meters long. If I compare with some program in Paris, is a half part of the Champs-Élysées. Just underneath you have Les Halles, and underneath you have Gare Montparnasse. You know, it's something. But the idea and the goal and the challenge for the city of Seoul, and for us also, is to provide a special system to refurbish the downtown. Because this kind of situation about the downtown around the world is the same. The downtown are dry. It's impossible to regenerate this kind of district. We should creating some routes. We should creating some new system of routes for our building. And with a light walk, we introduce the natural light into this big box in concrete. It is a main station, highway. You have a big forum. You have some universities and some other facilities. It's not a shopping mall. The shopping mall existing on the side. And we would like to connect shopping mall with this new situation, urban situation. It is the entrance of the light walk, of the light beam. It is inside when you go down. And this crystal is very interesting because it's not just a glass roof. It's a real building control the light and also control the heat and also control the smoke and all safe system. This reference, I like it, is because for me the floor and the ground floor is there. And it is exactly the project. And the main station, like a cathedral, another reference, a photo of Brassailles. It's a fantastic photo, and with the light coming from the top. You don't know exactly where is the floor. It is a section about the light walk, is a shell in concrete, and it is the light, and immediately the natural light is coming and change the quality of the core of this building. This guy is interesting. And he conducts the light. It's not new, but we could use also about the design, about the ornamentation, and some view. It is one entrance for the metro station with some different level, with the beam and the light. And we would like to build in metal, but also the most part in wood, in bamboo, inside. It's totally a different place. And this place is more or less and step by step in relationship with the existing condition and with the retail and with the car park. And we connect with this project, and we are creating a continuity between all parts. You could see this kind of system of the link between. And also, about the sustainability is absolutely perfect, because if you build a tower, you could have a very good performance about the sustainability, but it's not enough, because if you have this situation, you are in the soil, and immediately you could get this kind of performance, because it's absolutely passive. It's not dynamic. Another view, when you go down from the Greenland into the gallery in this building, and for example, another part of the promenade. And we hope to develop with successful story this project, because certainly this kind of scale and this kind of feeling in this kind of scale change totally the relationship and the human scale and human feeling between this kind of huge metropole, huge district, and I am very confident about this strategy to create some routes for the metropole, some routes for buildings. It's not new. A long time ago, from the beginning of the humanity, and the people and the organize the relationship between the ground floor and it's themselves and the building itself. And also, I would like to say, the architecture creating some limits with the wall, and this the limit between outside and inside, because the wall is protected, but also the wall is a boundary, is a limit. And now we could imagine some wall and some special quality for the wall to develop an exchange, like an interface between the inside and outside. And the new territory could be open if we consider the floor not like a boundary, not like a finished situation, not like a limit, but like another kind of surface, another kind of possibility and facilities and opportunities, to develop and to expand the world of the architecture. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias a los dos. IWAN nos ha llevado una excursión por el mundo y sus gentes, desde los rascacielos hasta los campos de refugiados, y ha acabado con las iglesias excavadas que daban entrada a la propuesta de Dominique PERRAULT, que ya desde los comienzos de su carrera con la Gran Biblioteca, pero también en Seúl y en tantos otros sitios, propone que las ciudades no crezcan ni a lo alto, ni a lo ancho, ni a lo alto, sino hacia abajo. No insisto más en esto. Sí que debo decir que IWAN, que como sabéis es el fotógrafo hoy más cotizado del mundo, todavía no ha fotografiado ninguna obra de Dominique, así que esto es también un encuentro entre ambos. Vamos a usar el inglés para hablar, no es la lengua materna de ninguno, él hubiera preferido el holandés, Dominique el francés y yo el castellano, así que vamos a conformarnos en hablar en una lengua ajena a todos. So we will use a language which is not ours, not yours, neither Dominique. So we'll manage with this international English to go. I will ask you to begin to make a commentary on the presentation of your colleague.
Yes, I'm always fascinated with how you can do to create space out of this void. I'm really fascinated with these kind of projects. I don't know your work very well, but like the project in Korea, I've seen, and I've spent time in the place, and yeah, like it's a fact which is overlooked by many architects. I feel like that you actually can create space by removing materials instead of building something, and to do something very subtle also, and use the ground and in a way the materials which are there already and the space which are there to create a whole new experience.
So Dominique, you have seen the work of IWAN BAAN. How come neither of your clients have commissioned him to do it?
Why not?
No, you must try to mend this historical mistake.
Maybe.
If you are not in his archive, you may not be in history.
I got a historical mistake, no, because not yet. Maybe we will see.
Architecture takes a long
Yes,
time,
absolutely.
patience.
But
so it
I
will
got a
come.
historical mistake. Is a very stupid story, because when the library was totally finished for the grand opening, and with the French President François Mitterrand, Andreas Gursky asked to make a photo.
Gursky?
Yes, long time, 20 years ago. No,
And you refused?
And the library. The staff of the library refused.
Oh, this is historical mistake.
It's a
Because
historical
Andreas
mistake. Okay, welcome.
Nice.
No, but you have seen how prominent people are in
Yes.
his. He discusses cities and architectures, but also people and their stories. They're full of narratives, you know, from this Saharian refugee camp, which has already grown to the real city, to the metropolis of the world, with this amazing image of New York, you know, dark, when the power sort of went down. So, Dominique, now, make a commentary on what you have seen.
I was a little bit impressed by the two scale, because when you start, huge, and big building, big city, and so, and step by step becomes more intimate, and with two people, three people, one animals, and some subject, you know, and I like this presentation come from the huge territory, the geography, and some object, very prominent, more or less interesting, but your photos are interesting. Sometimes the buildings are a little bit different, but it's not the debate. And after, step by step, stay only the human being at the end.
No, but that's fascinating.
And the church.
Yeah. No, that's also very much a link. No, but that fascinates me also a lot, that once you, my photography moves from that sort of macro scale, like these aerials, the big city overviews, to these very personal moments. And you see also like how people, even under the most dire circumstances, still aspire all these things which you as architects also try to do. And these moments, like that's, the commissioned work, what I get from architects, and then this sort of personal works where you step into really these personal lives and people building basically out of nothing, still these kind of spaces. It's really interesting to see these sort of narratives, how they combine in many ways and in very different levels.
Yeah, it is true that you have worked in many scales, from helicopters sort of over, you know, taking the territory, then going down to the microscope, people and their stories.
It's a good traveling.
Yeah, which is amazing. Of course, it was very difficult to bring IWAN BAAN here, because he never knows where he is going to be. He is always touring the world, and we say, do you think that mid-June, or are you going to be in this continent, or are you going to be in Australia, or in Chile, or who knows where?
That's hard to plan always, but blame the architects. They tell always a building is finished then, and then it takes another 5 months. So my schedule is always an endless puzzle.
No, it's very good to have you here, but we said that we wanted more questions from the audience, so I'm going to throw the question to you, and hoping that some of you will raise your hand and Ask them about their work as architect or as photographer, or as the relationship between both. So, John, what are you doing here that you are not holding your hand? Come on. Yeah, I knew you were going, but we need a microphone. Where's the microphone? Oh, here. You are going to get a microphone.
I tell you that I'm very fascinated with your picture from Sahara sentiment. It's a very nice point of view. I think that is quite a child point of view. It's like a child point of view. You see the sentiments of Sahara like a child when arrived there and was fascinated for the small things in the middle of the catastrophe, with practically small and sarcastic things sometimes, or little jokes, like a window with, and I like this point of view that we can find also this point of view in other pictures, but I'm very fascinated in your pictures. And basically, more than the picture, your point of view, the way you see the problems of the city, or the problems of the people. I like that. Just that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. No, like it's interesting. Like, of course, I know very little. It's a very complex subject. Like, if you talk about the Western Sahara, of course, like the whole political implications also, which I don't know much about, except for my experience there, really. But once you start sort of spending time there and really ask people also, like, and give interest in these, like what people do there. It's incredible always to see how open people are also, and like want to show you everything. Like, in a way, like there's many similarities with architects also. Like they come to me and ask me to invite me to come and see their newest building, photograph it and bring it out. You come to a place like that, people build it basically with their own hands. They're as excited basically as what they built, and they want to show you everything. And it's really fascinating when you step in all these total different worlds, what you experience there, and what people want to show and tell you of how they created spaces and created a place for themselves.
So, more questions from the audience, or else I'll have to extract them from you. No? No questions? I was hoping that some of you will ask, how do I get IWAN to one of my buildings, which is just completed? How do you do that? Can I ask you that? Or what they must do if they want you to photograph one of the buildings?
Yeah, like for me, it's always important that it's not just architecture, what you've seen in these pictures also, like there's like it's also maybe because of my background, like I'm not an architect, I know very little about architecture, but it's like my background in documentary. You try to tell a story, a picture story on a place, what people do there, and it's not just a building, but it makes part of a city, part of a larger landscape, and especially also the use, what people do there, how to bring that story out, what does that building for these people, for that environment, and so. And that's a story which with some buildings you can show, with maybe just an office building it's more difficult, but like it depends, like they're always different.
In any case, you
levels.
need a narrative. You need a narrative, you need a story.
Yeah.
And Dominique gave us one. He gave us a story of how the city can grow below, and can grow simply extracting material instead of adding things.
Yeah.
And you did it in the Grand Bibliothèque, and then in Seoul University, and in so many places, some of which you were shown, and now you want to build a huge Champs-Élysées there in Korea too. Yeah. So this is your narrative now? This is how you are going to propose yourself as an architect? I'm the one who excavates. So Dominique PERRAULT equal excavation?
No, exactly. But in my work, this kind of project, they are in minority. But I build this minority, and this minority becomes the majority.
But in the Manzanares River in Madrid, with the Caja Mágica,
No, okay.
you did not build.
Absolutely. It's
No.
the minority.
Well, now
No,
it's
but-
going to be
but-
extended.
but-
They need a new tennis court, so maybe you can build it underground. No?
Yes.
If you convince the mayor.
Wait.
Did you speak to the mayor?
No. I speak
No?
not about that.
Not about that.
No, but I'm very excited about this attitude, you know, and about this intellectual attitude also, but aesthetic certainly attitude. But I think the most interesting is also the social, economical, and scientific attitude. Why? Because this kind of projects are very impressive, because when you go up in a tower, you have the vertigo, you know. In this kind of project, when you go down, you feel nothing. You go down, but you know, it's
Yeah,
very
you go down to
interesting.
the belly of
because
the earth.
because the architecture and the volume and the space go with you, and the natural light, and you have the nature, you have a tree, it's normal.
Yeah.
But in fact, you are creating more properties. It's interesting about economical strategy. For example, for the library, we provide a public space, gratis.
Gratis.
Gratis. 50,000 square meters.
Yeah.
A new square for Paris.
But now you are even more ambitious, because
Okay, it's one point. Another point about the research. And because this today, and the political people speaking about consultation, participation, and so, okay, we are agree. But we are speaking about what? Because,
No, but for instance-
sorry, one
No,
second.
no.
We are speaking about what? Because we have a problem today, because we should develop a special database in 3D about the cities. A lot of scientific people work about the database for the brain. And the city, I think, is easier, I imagine. But with a database in 3D, we could organize some participation, consultation, sharing, because at the end, we are speaking about sharing. It's impossible to share a cake if you don't know the cake. That is a problem. And we are exactly in this problem. Okay, you make a layer, a street, a metro, you put some building, like that, and at the end, you know nothing. And it's a fantastic challenge for everybody to integrate all information in 3D about our environment. And after, you could share. Because it's possible, it's empty. Okay, I go there. I develop something there. And also, we are speaking after about the production, because the city, the smart city, is very people titled. But in fact, we should speak about the productive city. And we could have some farm. In Seoul, we imagine in the railway station a farm. And we provide some strawberry and some green salad and at the bottom of the tower. Yeah. And the proximity are coming. And I think we could develop a fantastic new vision about this kind of metropole, not only metropoles, but especially metropoles, obviously, and the citizen.
So agriculture is coming to the hearts of the cities.
Yeah.
But François Hollande asked you to think about how to change the heart of Paris. the Ile de la Cité.
Yeah.
And now, how about the new president? Is he still keen on doing it?
At this moment, he is thinking about the Grand Paris with Roland Castro recently, and but a group of architects are involved in the Grand Paris too. But you have two times in a mandat of the president: the first time and the second time. The second time, coming back in the center of the
Okay, you have to convince a new
Yes.
president that the Ile de la Cité can be renewed by excavating
Yes.
and putting things underground.
No, but,
José María Ezquiaga, who has left us half an hour ago, has happily returned. So he must hold up his hand and ask something to our friends. It's a minor punishment for leaving us for such a long time.
Yo creo que...
En inglés, en
Sí,
inglés.
sí, en inglés. I think that the question is not only to ask the people, but to look at the people, to know how the people feel, what are they looking for. And perhaps in the first presentation, I was not able to attend all your presentation. I'm sorry, because I had an urgency. But perhaps the most interesting in the presentation was the look, the stare to the people, to the situation, to trying to understand the behavior. No? And perhaps it's more interesting, and perhaps it's connect with the thinking of the alcaldesa of Madrid, Manuela. No? She was talking about little anecdotes, perhaps, but perhaps the lesson, the learning was, is necessary learn from people, but not always through the questionnaire, asking, be satisfied with standard answers, but overall understand. And understand needs, as you say, knowledge, and the knowledge of the expert, probably.
Yeah.
In fact, I think very often, it is architects and town planners and photographers who provide the images that can spark dreams. You know, participation, as you say, it's not only just putting crosses in a piece of paper. Sometimes it's finding images of the future that you find appealing and fighting for them.
Yeah.
Is that so? You did an exhibition of the Ile de la Cité, and was it well attended?
Yes, we got it.
And people participated? They said, I like this.
Yes, absolutely. And
were they also hostile to some of it?
No,
because you
no,
touched the heart of Paris.
It was very interesting because, in fact, this district, this island, disappear on the map, from the map of Paris. Nobody stay. Is a very authoritarian place. It's not very sexy. Nobody is not. It's gray, and it's very dark. And the idea, but you have the most important institution, and the idea is to reorganize the relationship between the Seine River and the island, and also between the cathedral and the Louvre, because you could walk. The promenade is fantastic between the cathedral and so. And the idea was how it's possible to change the relationship between the people and this kind of big, gray, sad building, authoritarian building, and we are creating some maps for the exhibition, and when the people go into the exhibition, say, we are there. We could go there. It's very.
This is also participation.
It's crazy because a lot of people coming, but nobody know where they are.
Dominique, I'm trying to get them to participate. In previous editions of the Congress, they say, yes, but you always speak in the platform, and they never give the word to us. And now we give the word to you, and nobody holds up his hand. So, may I prompt you to do it or may I continue the conversation? Nadie se atreve a levantar la mano, siempre al final las quejas son siempre, sí, estuvo bien, pero no había participación, no había participación. Por favor, participación, que alguien levante la mano, que estamos ya francamente desesperados. Ya solamente levanta la mano aquellos a los que les induzco a hacerlo. Es que ya... Bueno, pues si no hay manos, yo continúo aquí trabajando sin red. Iwan, I think
I can maybe tell one anecdote, like about how, what people, how people find it normal, how to build, and so like this sort of participation also. Like I'm working on a project already for a number of years. All my trips to China, I'm there quite regularly for just here and there commissions and so, but I try also to visit and look at the old vernacular projects all over China, and it's fascinating to see how people used to build, like the incredible variety of how people used to build all over the country there. And it's all so different depending on the location, kind of materials people could find, all kind of local conditions, weather, climate, all these kind of things. And then when you see now China, it's only high rises and only the concrete factories, the steel factories, the glass factories, and everything kind of looks the same. And one of the things which really stood out there for me, and is also coming back on this sort of underground living, was this whole community in the north of China. I didn't show now any pictures in this presentation, but it's in the area around Xi'an, where for centuries people lived underground. And it's still like, they all had the aspiration to live in the typical Chinese courtyard house, which you see in all kind of variations all over the country there. But when you talk to people there, like they said, we could never afford to buy materials, to get materials to build the house. So for them, the most logic thing was just to carve it out. And there you see the classical Chinese courtyard house, a square courtyard, but just dug out into the earth with like rooms into the earth. And like, the only thing they needed was just their manpower, which was readily available, and just dig out the space. And there was a time where 30 million people lived there in that way, all underground.
Really?
And
that many?
That's now all almost disappeared because of regulations. It's not allowed anymore, and all these kind of things. And like these sort of, with what was for people totally normal there is disappearing so quickly, just because of the notion of how you should live now, and all these kind of things, that you have to live in a high rise, that you live in a building, that you have to buy materials, that architecture is difficult, or that it's complicated to build a thing, that you need all kind of expertise. But there were for centuries like these very natural ways to build in so many different places.
I want to ask you a personal question, which is, you know the world better than any of us. You have made so many tours around the world, going to not only the metropolis, but to the very far away places, visiting shanty towns and palaces. And after so many years, getting to know the world better, are you optimistic about the state of the world? Because the conversation we had before this one, at least the moderator was very pessimistic and thought that we were going down the drain and everything was collapsing. And what is your own perception?
It's difficult. When you look like at the picture of Miami and sort of the crazy construction there, and just this little filter of land basically sitting on the water, and you know that place will be there only for maybe a few more decades, and we're building. It's kind of pointless to build in places like that. But at the same time, when you look into all these sort of personal moments, there's also a lot of optimism in these places, and to see how, people create also like places under the most dire circumstances, and we find a way to exist with environment and with conditions, and so it will be difficult.
So you never be elegiac, but on the contrary, you know, optimistic about the ability of people to survive in the more difficult situations. Even if we are destroying many things which are valuable, still we shall manage. And so. Dominique, what do you think? Do you want to close this with a note of optimism or with a dark, somber view of the future?
I think this period, if you want, is very impressive because it's very dark, very violent in one side, and in the other side is absolutely incredible. All is possible. You know, and the opposite is like that, and you have, and it's very dangerous. I am not optimistic or pessimistic. I don't know, but the critical mass about the destruction of the planet is real. Yeah. It's not a discussion. It's real. Okay.
It's horrible. But Macron hasn't made you more optimistic?
Macron is working during 5 years, after we will see. It's not the good scale. The good scale is the billions people living on the planet. That is a good scale. The president and the political people is not the good scale. The good scale is the population. It's a population. And the population could go in this way or in this way. It depends. We will see. But all is possible.
Muy bien, pues en cierta medida hemos continuado el debate sobre los desafíos demográficos de los que se hablaba en la sesión anterior, las migraciones, al final, un tema inevitable en cualquier debate de hoy. No me gustaría acabar con este tono melancólico y elegíaco, así que les daré una buena noticia que seguro que han visto ya en sus teléfonos móviles, y es que el ministro de Cultura ha presentado su dimisión. Muy buenas noches a todos y mañana nos volvemos a quedar aquí temprano. Perdonen, pero déjenme que les diga la hora, para recordarles. Mañana comenzamos a las 9:30. Sean puntuales, por favor. Gracias.